Thank you very much, Sonia, for the kind introduction. Let me share my screen. And see, can you see it? Can you just give me a thumbs up? Okay.
Fine.
Thank you very much. So I'm really happy to be here today for this webinar, and thank you, Sonia, for the kind introduction. So I will go straight into it. Today we're going to discuss the EU Corporate Sustainability Framework. What is it? Just to give you some base information. I understand there are some of you who already know a lot about this, and maybe some of you who know very little. So I'll try to give you some basic information to start with. We will then zoom on the due diligence concept, the due diligence idea, and then we will go to more concrete things. And the most important question, perhaps for all of you, is what does all of this mean for Serbian companies? We will then do a looking ahead section and discuss the current omnibus process. And then my colleague, Dr. Uvarova, will move to insights from companies, and we'll talk in particular about companies in the region and where they are with the due diligence process. And then, as Sonia said, we will take questions, either direct questions, or also you can use the Q&A chat to ask questions as you prefer. So what are we talking about when we say EU Corporate Sustainability Framework? Essentially, we are talking about a set of EU rules that aim to drive transparency, accountability, and responsible business practice. These rules, there are different ones. I'll show some of them in a minute, but these rules, they all have different focuses and they set up different requirements. But we see also that some of these rules overlap. So we have this puzzle of rules. Some of them really concern different areas, and there's a bit of overlap between them. Together, they form the corporate sustainability framework. So that's what we will focus on today. So let me just give you a few elements and a few examples of those rules. So we have the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which has been enforced since 2024. That rule, that particular piece of legislation, is there to improve transparency and also comparability of sustainability information. Then we have, for us in the Center of Excellence, the most important of those rules. That's the Corporate Due Diligence Directive. It was adopted in 2024, but it is currently delayed. We will explain that further in the webinar. And that piece of legislation mandates due diligence for companies to address adverse human rights and environmental impacts. I will explain a bit later what that means. And then we have a range of sector or issue-specific rules that concern, for example, conflict minerals, and that regulation requires due diligence for importers of specific minerals. We have the deforestation regulation, which is about deforestation, as the name suggests. And there too, we have a due diligence requirement for companies who are placing some commodities on the EU market, commodities like soy, timber, coffee, and also there's a whole list, but those are examples. And then we have the forced labor regulation, also part of this sustainability framework, not yet applicable. And that regulation will require companies to ensure that their supply chains are free from forced labor. I could have added others to this list, but those to me are the core ones. When we talk about sustainability framework in the EU, those are usually the rules that we mean and the rules that will come up. So today, I want to talk in particular about the second one, the due diligence rules, because this is really the focus of this presentation. So zooming in on due diligence. So first of all, what is due diligence? It's a process to identify, prevent, mitigate, and account for adverse impact in operations and value chains. So what does that mean in concrete terms? It means that companies should know and show their human rights impacts. They should know what impacts they have, and they should be transparent about those impacts. So what do we mean by adverse impacts? Adverse impacts means negative impacts on human rights. So for example, local communities, access to water, that's one example of negative human rights impact, or adverse impact on the environment, for example, any kind of pollution. There's a lot of overlap there because a heavily polluted land will lead to human rights impact. So sometimes it's difficult to make the distinction between the two, but when we say adverse impacts, we mean both human rights and environmental impact. That is the key idea. So where does the term due diligence come from, human rights due diligence? It comes from mostly the 2011 United Nations guiding principles on business and human rights, but you also find this term in other international instruments, and in particular in the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises on responsible business conduct, and also in another OECD document, such as the OECD due diligence guidance. So it's a concept that is not only EU, is what I mean to say. It's used in EU legislation, but it is coming from the 2011 United Nations guiding principles on business and human rights. So we've had this idea around for some time now. This is not a novelty. So why did I want to zoom in on due diligence? Because this concept, this idea that companies should know and show their impacts on human rights and the environment, it is central to the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, but also to the conflict minerals, deforestation, and forced labor regulations. So we see this concept not just in the due diligence directive, but also in other pieces of legislation. And this is just an illustration of how it's supposed to work. And I'll let you have a look. You could also have a look at the slides afterwards. It starts with embedding responsible business conduct into policies and management systems. And then we start the circle, and we start the process, identify and assess impacts, seize, prevent, or mitigate those impacts, then moving on, track the implementation and the results, communicate how the impacts are addressed, and in case there has been some severe impact, or that there are some impacts that need remediation, there's also, as part of the process, this requirement to provide for remediation or cooperate in remediation where appropriate. So this whole circle of due diligence, which is really central in all of those pieces of legislation. So it's a very, very core idea in the EU corporate sustainability framework. So some of you probably already know this, but the due diligence idea is present in national law. It's not just EU law. And in particular, we see three European countries that have adopted due diligence legislation. They didn't wait for the EU to step in on this. And perhaps perhaps some of you will be familiar in particular with the German Supply Chain Due Diligence Act. I know there are strong links between Germany and Serbia. I will not try to say the name of the law in German, but you have it written down here. In English, we usually call it Supply Chain Due Diligence Act. And so these, just to take this example, these three laws in these three countries, they all have different requirements with different scopes and thresholds. They are triggered at different for different companies, but they all are based on this similar idea, which is that companies should know and show their human rights and in some cases environmental impacts as well. So they're all based on the same idea. I'm just looking at the time. Yeah. So moving on to what does the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive mean for Serbian companies? So first of all, the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive applies directly to large EU companies. Oops, this is going too fast, sorry. It applies directly to large EU companies and also to non-EU companies, including Serbian companies, who have a turnover of over 450 million euro in the EU. I am not sure how many Serbian companies, sorry, I don't know what's going on with my slides. I'm not sure how many Serbian companies would fall into that category, but that's one possibility for Serbian companies to be directly in scope of the directive. If they make business in the EU and if they make more than 450 million euro annually of business in the EU. Now, perhaps the way most Serbian companies will be affected by this piece of legislation is indirect. So Serbian companies will be indirectly affected if they are suppliers or business partners of an EU company that is itself subject to the corporate sustainability due diligence directives. What do I mean by indirectly affected? I mean that EU companies will require suppliers, including those that are in Serbia, to comply with due diligence standards. So even if the Serbian companies themselves are not in scope because maybe they don't reach that level of business in the EU, they can still be affected as suppliers of companies that are in scope. And what will happen is that Serbian companies that are in the supply chains of EU firms will be asked to provide information about their human rights and environmental practices. And it's already the case and I'm sure some of you will have experience with that. It is already the case for companies that do business with, for example, German companies that have to follow the German law. So what are the risks in case of non-compliance? We can see that there's a risk maybe of losing contracts or business with EU partners in case of non-compliance because with the new corporate sustainability due diligence directive, EU companies will be required to ensure that their entire value chain adheres to the directive's requirements. So every Serbian company that is in business with a European company that falls within the scope of the due diligence directive indirectly will be affected. And this is also why we're doing this this webinar, to sort of explain that and yeah, make this link clear. So just my own final slide, and then I will give the floor to to Olena. So right now we are in a bit of a difficult situation because since February 2025, the EU Commission has initiated what it is calling a process of simplification to increase competitiveness in the form of an omnibus directive. So concretely, this means that the corporate sustainability due diligence directive is now renegotiated. It was adopted in 2024, but it's now back under negotiation. And the next step now is the EU Parliament will vote again on a revision, on a revised text sometime between the 11th and the 13th of November. So very next week, basically, very, very soon. And this new text that is now being discussed, I won't go into details, but the requirements of the proposed new text, it's not adopted yet, but the requirements of the proposed new text are much less strong than the original that was adopted in 2024. For example, the new text only mentions what we call tier 1 suppliers, so suppliers that are direct business partners of companies that fall within the scope of the directive, but not further down the supply chain. So only tier 1 suppliers. And there are other changes. For example, the original directive has EU-wide civil liability provisions, and this is out in the proposed new text. So it is rather uncertain times, but I think the main message we have today is that even without the corporate sustainability due diligence directive, conducting due diligence makes business sense. And we see that because many EU companies already do it following soft law instruments. They haven't waited for the EU to legislate to actually start this process. And we see some key reasons to conduct due diligence despite this omnibus process. We see that, first of all, there are legal reasons to conduct due diligence because some national laws, for example, the German one, the corporate sustainability reporting directive, and also sector-specific regulations still require it. We have also reputational reasons. It allows companies to avoid scandals and possible boycotts, and also ESG downgrades. We see also strategic reasons for companies to conduct due diligence in the sense that it helps them manage risks, gain competitive advantage, and future-proof operations. And then, of course, there are ethical reasons behind all of this. It's a way to uphold global standards and societal expectations. I will leave it at this for now, and now give the floor to my colleague, Dr. Olena Uvarova.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. And first of all, thank you very much, Sonia, and all your team for organizing this event. And thank you to all participants for the interest to this topic. And yeah, just few points to support what Nadia already said. Of course, we have huge wave also in Asia Pacific region, because some countries in Asia Pacific are going to adopt mandatory human rights due diligence, and now we are in very interesting situation when we have all these discussions and all these attempts to find a compromise in the European Union related to corporate sustainability due diligence directive, but at the same time we have very quite a strong development on mandatory human rights due diligence in Asia Pacific region, and of course it would impact European market in any case as well, and also related to the voting that we expect will happen next week about omnibus and all these things. For now, we have 3 versions of revised text of corporate sustainability due diligence directive, and of course we don't go in details during this webinar, because it would make sense then to discuss the final text, which will be adopted. And by the way, the voting next week voting will not be the final decision, because in any case then the further negotiations will happen and so on. But just to let you know that for now we have 3 versions and a lot of discussions around this tier 1 and climate transition plan and civil liability and all this. And so let's see what we will have as a final text. And also, I would like to mention yesterday, I think that the European Union published reports about candidate countries and Ukraine and Serbia and Moldova and other countries in these reports. And for me, it was very interesting to check what European Union mentioned about, corporate sustainability. If any words is there about corporate sustainability. Why I was so interested, because in particular in Ukraine, we were involved in the discussion around accession process and the questions on business and human rights and corporate sustainability due diligence, because Ukraine received these questions from European Commission. Do we have national action plan on business and human rights? Are we going to implement corporate sustainability due diligence directive? What we are doing to implement corporate sustainability reporting directive, and so on. But in the reports, I checked Ukrainian and Serbian reports. In the reports, I found just references to corporate sustainability reporting requirements. And from one side, I should admit that companies in our region, and now I will go also to overview what companies in our region are doing and what do they think about corporate sustainability requirements. But what we see is that companies are much more aware about corporate sustainability reporting, non-financial reporting than about human rights due diligence or corporate sustainability due diligence. But at the same time, the part of the problem, if I can call this a problem, that this reverse understanding of what of chicken and eggs, because to have what you report about, you need to have a process to indicate what kind of risks you have and what kind of actions you need to do to address these risks. And basically, corporate sustainability reporting should be about the results of corporate sustainability due diligence. But because we have this, opposite order of adoption of directives by the European Union, that corporate sustainability reporting had non-financial reporting directives were adopted earlier, and just after that we received the directive on corporate sustainability due diligence. Now this mindset of companies, it's not just about our region, but in general, the mindset of companies, I would say, is affected by this legislative process. But our message is that for having, robust reporting, you need to have due diligence process, but not just for having nice reports, but as Nadia already mentioned, we have the list of reasons why companies need due diligence. So yeah, we before Omnibus happened with us, we did the survey, and it was initiated by business and human rights team in UNDP, by the regional hub on business and human rights in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. And the idea was basically to understand if companies in our region are ready for corporate sustainability due diligence directive and other regulations which are linked to corporate sustainability due diligence. As also Nadia mentioned, forced labor ban, deforestation regulations, they also have due diligence components. And of course, reporting. Can we go to the next slide? Sorry, I forgot that I'm. Yeah, and the reason was not just because of corporate sustainability due diligence directive, but also because of this global trend and moving from voluntary corporate social responsibility to mandatory human rights and environmental due diligence. Again, I need to mention again that it's not just a European Union trend, it's a really global trend, and not just because of national initiatives, but also because of practices of companies and their expectations from their suppliers. But for a long time, of course, the European Union was considered as a global leader in this shift, and we still think that the European Union maybe will reconsider some requirements, but the idea of corporate respect for human rights and the need of corporate sustainability due diligence will be still there. And the next slide. And also Nadia mentioned this omnibus scene, but what is behind of omnibus, the idea of competitiveness, and if you are interested in understanding, the background of the whole discussion which is happening now in the European Union, Draghi report was published in September 2024, and it called for a competitiveness strategy for Europe, and then competitiveness compass was adopted, and basically omnibus is connected with this idea of competitiveness, and I could also announce our new study. We will present this new study during the UN Forum on Business and Human Rights in 3 weeks, and this UNDP study will be about connection and correlation between human rights performance, corporate human rights performance, and financial performance. And basically what we were trying to do was to indicate what is the correlation between companies' efforts to meet, these requirements on human rights due diligence practices and processes, and how these efforts are reflected in financial performance of companies based on accounting based indicators and also market based indicators. But yeah, if you are interested, we can also, when the study should be published in next 2-3 days, we can share then with all participants. We will ask Sonia and Belgrade Center for Human Rights to share with you the published version if you are interested. And next slide. Yeah, so basically about the survey, very quickly, 180 companies participated. Most of them were small and medium enterprises. Serbian companies also participated. Around 20 companies from Serbia took part in this survey, because this survey covered the whole region of Eastern Europe and Central Asia. And additionally to survey, we also took 30 companies randomly from this survey and assessed their compliance with corporate human rights benchmark co-indicators. I will tell very briefly more. And also we conducted interviews with some selected companies. And next slide. And the main finding was that companies actually showed that they are quite aware with UN guiding principles, with corporate sustainability due diligence directive, and with the general idea of human rights due diligence. You can see on the slide that basically companies, the average level of awareness by companies is around 4 out of 5 points, which is very high, basically, level of awareness with human rights due diligence concept. And also we had several other questions which showed us that there is a positive correlation between company size and adherence to the UN guiding principles on business and human rights. Larger companies report higher adherence levels. And the next slide, please. And also I mentioned corporate human rights benchmark. It's a well-established, well-known instrument to assess the implementation of UN guiding principles on business and human rights by companies, and the co-indicators cover different elements, but basically we are talking about commitment to respect human rights, commitment to respect the human rights of workers, commitment to remedy, but also quite specific procedures related to human rights due diligence. And benchmark is assessing companies if they identify human rights risks and impacts, if they integrating these results into their processes, if they track the effectiveness of the actions to respond to human rights risks and impacts, if they communicate on human rights impact, and if they map and disclose their supply chains, and the special attention is paid to remedies and grievance mechanisms. Next slide. And what we see when we compare the results of survey and the results of human rights benchmark assessment, that companies are considering themselves as quite aware with, with these requirements and with the standards of UN guiding principles on business and human rights and the directive, but at least if we assess them based on these well-established criteria, indicators from corporate human rights benchmark, we can see that the level of implementation of these core indicators like commitment to respect human rights, identification of human rights risks, and mapping supply chains and so on, in practice, the level of implementation is very low, and it's not, the problem that companies are trying to provide an truth or something, but it's a problem how companies understand these standards and if they and how they communicate their understanding, because the benchmark is based on the information which companies provide publicly about their human rights policies, practices, and processes. And next slide. And also what we identified that there is still a problem of misunderstanding of human rights due diligence and the general idea of corporate responsibility to respect human rights with corporate social responsibility. Saying corporate social responsibility, we understand some philanthropic initiatives, and during interviews when we asked companies about their understanding of human rights due diligence or their communication with local communities which could be affected by companies' operations, we received responses about corporate social responsibility initiatives like organizing soccer competition or something like this, or providing local schools with some equipment. And also there is a general problem I already mentioned, is that companies focus on reporting and they pay a lot of attention to what kind of sustainability reports they are publishing, but they are, in many cases, they are not ready to provide information how really they indicate human rights risks, how they track these risks, their measures, how they engage stakeholders in meaningful way. So the question of meaningful actions to have the information to report about. This is still a gap, and it's not just for the region, but in general, I think. And yeah, this checkbox mentality basically based on the reporting accent. And the next slide. Yeah, so our key idea is that in many cases, we talk about, sustainability journeys, that the process of improvement on human rights performance of companies is even more, in many cases, is more important than the result per se. And it's very much true that companies should, place themselves in the sustainability journey and understand this process like a journey, and try to assess this dynamic for themselves. But at the same time, when you are in this journey, it's very crucial to have this understanding of human rights due diligence like a coordinates of this journey. So not just doing good, but also doing good with understanding of key concepts of human rights due diligence. And the next one. And just two last final points. In this survey, we identified key challenges. Basically, companies responded what do they see as the key challenges to implement human rights due diligence, and the lack of financial resources, uncertainty of domestic regulation, and difficulty in tracking and managing supply chain risks, and limited guidance from government agencies or industry associations were identified as key challenges. And many companies told us that they need to have guidance, they need to have more certainty, first of all from the national regulators, but also from the industry associations, to be in line with these expectations on corporate responsibility to respect human rights. And next one. And also we asked about from what resources companies get their information, awareness on corporate sustainability. And it was for us very interesting that companies identified colleagues and professional networks, first of all, as a key source of information. And on the second place, industry associations were placed. And it's it also it is signaling to us what kind of key channels could be used to build more strong capacities of companies in the region on corporate sustainability issues. And next one. Yeah, Nadia.
Yeah, thank you, Olena. Just very quickly, I have a final slide, and then maybe we can move on to questions. We recently, the Center of Excellence, this is a Center of Excellence event. The Center of Excellence partnered with an initiative called We Are Europe, and we did yet another survey. So this is different from the one Olena just talked about. We did a survey about, I'm trying to see if my slides will load. Yeah, we did a survey specifically on the omnibus to see what companies in Europe think about these proposed changes. So I'm not going to go into detail because I think it's better if we spend time on questions and answers. But I will, there is the link to the survey in the slides, so I will not show you all the text I have planned. But when you get the slides, you can click on the survey link and see the results. I have also posted about this on LinkedIn if you want to look at my profile and then see the results there as well. But I will leave it at this and maybe stop sharing my screen, and so that we can focus on questions. Okay, Sonia?
Yes, sure. Thank you both. Ja ću sad da se prebacim na srpski. Ovo je sad trenutak, pošto nemamo baš mnogo vremena, za vas. Ukoliko imate pitanja, dakle, još jednom možete da podignete ruku ukoliko želite da se uključite i da date ili komentar ili ako imate pitanje za Nađu ili Olenu ili da u Q&A ovom tabu prosto postavite. I evo sad i tu su moje koleginice koje će vas svakako pustiti ukoliko neko želi da se javi. A dok čekamo, ja bih možda imala pitanje, mislim i za Nađu i za Olenu, zapravo šta očekujete sada od Evropskog parlamenta? Šta će da se desi, pošto je to sledeće nedelje već? Kakvo je raspoloženje poslaničko?
Olena, do you want to take that one? Sorry.
Nice question. To be honest, I don't know. We are following, all kind of information which is coming from the European institutions. And 2 weeks ago, we conducted the conference on responsible business for recovery in Ukraine, and the representative of European Commission was speaking there, but also with without any sign of what kind of final results we can expect. I think that maybe people from European Commission also don't know what to expect, because now it's a turn of European Parliament, and also those of us who are following very closely. Of course, we are concerned with all this news which are coming from the US and countries like Qatar, because this just this morning some people from BHR community published the letter from Attorney General in the US to Meta, to company Meta, and basically to Zuckerberg, to call them not to follow corporate sustainability due diligence directive and so on. So clearly there is a political processes around, and I honestly don't take this responsibility to try to indicate what kind of decisions we could expect. I can just tell you what my personal hopes are, and of course my personal hopes are that the European Union will follow their own values, and yeah.
Thank you, Olena. We have one question. Can you see it, Olena, Nadia?
Yes, I can see it. Maybe I can.
Yeah.
I can
Take
try to answer. Can participants see the question, or do I have to say it?
Well, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Vesna.
Okay, but I'll just say, so if we have a question, in the face of all this uncertainty, what course of action would you advise Serbian businesses in the next few years? And what would you say to those that say being responsible is too expensive? So I think it is very uncertain. That is true. And we cannot expect businesses, Serbian businesses, but also businesses in the EU, to follow those discussions the way Olena and I follow them, right? Which is every day there's something new. So I think, it's not fair to expect that from companies and that have a business to run. But certainly events like this one, and engaging with those who follow those discussions, attend events and read briefings and short reports on what is happening is always a good idea, and sort of build knowledge on those issues within the business community in Serbia is hugely important, and that is what we're trying to do also with this project. The question of that conducting due diligence is too expensive is a very important point, I think. And thank you for asking this, because yes, conducting due diligence seriously is going to cost money. I think we shouldn't lie about this in the human rights community. It is important to be open about this. However, the benefits are also very important. And this is one of the key results and findings from the survey I mentioned at the end, where we have talked to companies. Well, we haven't talked to them. It's not interviews, it's a survey, but we had questions about, for the companies that conduct due diligence, what are the benefits? And we see this long list of benefits: being more resilient, having supply chains that are more solid, having more trust with your business partners, leading eventually to more solid results in terms of how much money is made. And so I think we can be honest about the fact that it is expensive, but also say that there are benefits, and it's important that companies who are engaged already in this process are transparent and vocal about that, because companies need to hear from other companies. I mean, it's great that we're here, but as academics, we have a voice, but it's also important that companies speak out, and those and also business associations and things. So yeah, I think there's a lot more to be said about the benefits of that, and not just, oh, you need to comply, and it's yet another thing companies need to do.
And if I can just briefly jump in, actually, the question came from Sinisha Milatovic, who is my colleague in UNDP and who is a co-author and creator of the idea of this research that I mentioned during my presentation about corporate correlation between corporate human rights performance and financial performance. And basically, it was a co-question. We tried to respond if human rights due diligence is too expensive, then what companies should do to be successful in terms of profitability, and the results are that actually there is no negative impact to companies to have robust human rights due diligence procedures, and in opposite way, companies which demonstrate human rights performance and improvement in their human rights processes and practices, they also demonstrate more efficiency or more operational efficiency in terms of return on assets. So yeah, to be very, very brief, it's expensive, but if we take into consideration all impacts on financial performance, then companies in final, they are successful financially as well.
Hvala Olena, hvala Nađa, hvala Siniši na pitanju. Mislim da sada već moramo da zatvorimo današnji webinar. Hvala vam svima koji ste učestvovali. Mi ćemo podeliti svim učesnicima današnju prezentaciju, gde ćete takođe moći da nađete i istraživanja o kome su pričale i Nađa i Olena i da malo detaljnije sve to pogledate. Mi vam svakako ostajemo na raspolaganju za bilo kakva dodatna pitanja i očekujte još poziva od nas u narednom periodu. Hvala najlepše i doviđenja svima.
Hvala.